Gwyn, Nashandra, the Soul of Cinder. What do these bosses have in common? Well, simply put, they're the final part of your journey, your last obstacle, the final boss. But what makes a good final boss? Is it the gameplay? The cinematics? The difficulty? The build-up? While all these are really important for a final boss, I think one stands above the rest, and that's the build-up. When playing a game, you often have an idea of your endpoint, something that's pointed out from the start, your end goal. Now, not all games have an endpoint, but in games like the Souls titles with rich and deep lore, there's obviously a story to follow. The build-up is what makes your final fight so important. It sets everything up, giving you these expectations of what the end of your journey is, so you train, learn, and defeat the obstacles in your path until you're ready to go through the fog and pass that final wall. To break down what I think makes a good build-up, I want to take you through each game and how each boss is set up. The first look at Gwyn is in the opening cinematic, and we get a clear look of what Gwyn looks like and the power he has and the position he's in. We don't learn that Gwyn sacrificed himself for the first flame yet, but what we do learn is throughout time, a legend of seeking out the chosen undead in the land of Lordran arose, and gives us our first goal, ringing the 2 bells. And this is reinforced by the crestfallen undead in Firelink, as he tells us to go search for the first bell. Next, after defeating the Taurus demon, we can meet Solaire, and he tells us what we already could assume, that Lordran is the birthplace of Lord Gwyn, and within the first few areas of the game, we've already heard the name Gwyn and even saw him in the opening cutscene. So we can already assume that Gwyn is someone of utmost importance in the land of Lordran. After you ring the bells and collect the Lord Vessel, back in Firelink we can meet Kingseeker Frampt, and he tells us that he's waited for over 1,000 years for someone like us to become Gwyn's successor, and Link the Flame to keep the Age of Dark away. So with this bit of information, we now understand that it was Gwyn who blinked the first flame, and we have our end goal to surpass Gwyn, establishing the final boss of the game. If you're able to meet Kath as well, he confirms that Gwyn sacrificed himself and awaits in the kiln. From here on, you go through the game getting the parts of Gwyn's souls to feed the Lord Vessel, and once open, we are greeted with the dark and disenchanting lonely area. The kiln, once being where the first flame burned brightly, now sits dim, and its long walk fighting the last of Gwyn's defense. Once the fog wall, everyone we fought, everything we fought, everything we collected, and everything we've learned has built up to this point. We walk through the fog and see Gwyn, a fraction of his former self, in a melancholic theme. It's not some super flashy fight, it's just you versus Gwyn. No gimmick. He uses the same kind of attacks that you've been dodging this entire game. And once it's over, you link the first flame, and wait a potential 1,000 years for the next person to link the first flame and continue the Age of Fire. To give a shortened recap, all you hear throughout your journey in the lands of Lordran is Gwyn, and we can find a bit more about him by reading item descriptions and talking to other NPCs. The way Dark Souls 1 builds up Gwyn, showing you his importance above the rest, and for the final fight, be it one-on-one, no gimmicks, you just using what you learned but with a simple but effective theme, makes Gwyn such a good final boss. The build-up is what makes this boss so impactful. It wouldn't be a good boss with the whole game, it would just be a standard fight, nothing special, but the build-up is what makes this work, and it works perfectly. Dark Souls 2 is a direct sequel and has 2 different stories which end up merging towards the end, and that's linking the first flame again to continue the Age of Fire, and defeating the Shards of Manus, the negative emotions that were released and split at his death back in Dark Souls 1. Nashandra is one of these shards, the greed and lust for power Manus felt. But let's backtrack. Unlike Dark Souls 1, Nashandra or any of the bosses aren't mentioned in the opening cinematic. The only connection to Nashandra is the mention of Drang Lake, and this actually serves as our first objective. The Firekeeper says we will eventually arrive at Drang Lake without really knowing why, and that's true. We go and collect the 4 previous souls to go through the Shrine of Winter and arrive at Drang Lake. Now, feel free to call it a cop-out if you want, but I personally think that this is exactly ties into the theme of Dark Souls 2. People are drawn to this land by fate. The bearer of the curse will arrive at the gates of Drang Lake. And this next part isn't lore, it's just how I see it, so take it with a little bit of salt. It's Nashandra's calling, along with the cycle of the first flame, that brings people to this land, drawing them in. But back to the main game. Entering the castle, we meet Chancellor Wellinger, who shares a bit of exposition. He brings up that the king is missing. And that the queen has already taken him, a rising awareness of this queen we are soon to meet. On top of that, continuing to talk to him, he mentions that the queen came alone with unparalleled beauty and told the king that the giants were a threat, and so the king sought out the giants and brought back the kinship so he could use the giants to build his new castle with his new queen. The last bit of dialogue Wellinger has is how the queen brought peace so quiet it was dark, alluding to her connection to Manus and her future plans. Continuing through the castle, once arriving to the outside, we can stumble across a painting of a woman, and upon getting closer, we start to get cursed. Not too far from the painting is when we get to see the queen, who tells us her name's Nashandra. And right away, something is off. First, she's sitting far back, which can be interpreted in a bunch of different ways. Second, she almost instantly seems disinterested and even mocks Vendrick. Odd behavior from someone who came to this land and fell in love with Vendrick. She dismisses his existence and the fact that he's missing, saying we have no need for two rulers. This should already raise alarms, as it seems she had something to do with this. At this point, you'll continue to go through the game until reaching the crypt. In the crypt, you'll face off the last defense of the king, and then you'll find him, King Vendrick, withering away and gone hollow. Coming back here with the DLC, King's Crowns will unlock some extra dialogue, and most notably,
I am no king. I am more fit to be a jester. I was unaware of my own blindness. Seeker of fire, I see you've subdued another foul creature. One of the father of the Abyss spawn. That confounded quintessence of humanity. The Abyss once had form, but then dissipated. And yet, traces of its existence endured. Each fragment, thirsting for power, spread dark with no relent. My dear Chandra was one such fragment. A feeble, tiny thing that thirsted for power more than any other. Driven by insatiable lust for a worthy vessel.
Nashandra has seemed to have manipulated Vendrick into doing her bidding, conquering the giants and building the castle on top of the First Flame, and try to convince Vendrick to take the throne. On the Souls lore wiki, there's a theory mentioned that I think is very interesting, and I'd like to share a reminder that this isn't canon and isn't concrete evidence to my point, but I do think it's very interesting. The Throne of Want door opens to the giant's kinship because that's how Vendrick designed it. He wanted to link the fire back to the giants so that they would be cursed with the endless cycle rather than humans. That was the threat Nashandra had told Vendrick, and that's how they could ultimately end the cycle. And Vendrick had already stolen the giant's essence to link the fire back to them. Sensing their own downfall, a giant hero eventually rose up, their parallel the chosen undead, and lead the assault on Drangleic, to try and retrieve their essence so Vendrick couldn't link the curse back to them. That's when Vendrick found out Nashandra wanted an entity with a large enough soul that she could consume, to ensure the Age of Fire would be extinguished once and for all. I, however, think that this theory makes complete sense because of Nashandra's manipulation on Vendrick, her continuing lust to plunge the world into an age of dark for good. Back to the main game. If you go back to Drangleic and talk to Nashandra after achieving key items such as the King's Ring and Ashen Mistheart, she'll tell you what to do next, which is her manipulation to get you closer to the throne. Once arriving to the Throne of Want and taking out the Throne Watcher and Defender, you'll meet the true Nashandra, the true form of the Shard of Manus. All her previous attire was in a facade for her manipulation, and here she stands, ready to dispatch of you to use the throne for her own plans. Say what you want about the actual fight itself. I do agree with a lot of people that it's a boring fight, but it actually makes sense as she is weak. She resorts to manipulation and lies to make up for her lack of power, and that's why she makes us open the throne instead of her going out and getting everything herself. This is evident from her entering the throne room behind us as she needed us to open the door for her. From what we learn of Chancellor Wellinger, we know that she's not to be trusted, but she plays her part so well that it blurs the line of who's right and who's wrong at first. The build-up in the Chandra works so well because unlike Gwyn hearing with great power and feats, it's someone who lacks that power, but pulls the strings behind the curtain, someone who is not to be trusted. The opening cinematic starts off showing how the First Flame is once again fading and how previous Lords of Cinders are waking up for more souls to flood into the world once again to satiate the first flame. Now we end up seeing the Firelink armor here, but I want to point out that in my opinion this isn't the Soul of Cinder. As we can see that this is not the Firelink Greatsword, and I think it's just a case of throwing the armor set from the, cover on here. It's not the actual Soul of Cinder. After going through the graves, we get to Firelink, and the Firekeeper tells us to put the Lords of Cinder on their throne so you can have enough souls to link the first flame once more, telling us to place the coiled sword to head to Lothric Castle, the castle of the prince who declined to link the first flame and cause the old lords to reawaken. Heading to Lothric's high wall, we meet Emma, who sits at the base of the castle and tells us once again to seek the lords and put them on their thrones. And from here on, we don't really hear anything else of the final boss. It's mainly us collecting the 3 lords, placing them on their thrones. Once killing the last lord, however, we get teleported back to the high wall and meet Emma again, this time on the brink of death. Before dying, she tells us the fire is fading and we need one more lord, Prince Lothric. So we climb up his castle and the archives until getting to his last line of defense. A climactic battle showing how protected he is, and we face off against the princes. A climactic battle and honestly one of the best fights in the whole trilogy, and after Lothric's defeat is over, we place his head on the throne, and then off to the kiln and link the flame. All the credits! Obviously, I'm leaving something out, the Soul of Cinder, the actual final boss, and based on what I'm titling this video, you can guess what I'm about to say. The Soul of Cinder is the worst final boss. Before you gouge my eyes out, let me explain. The Soul of Cinder has no mention up until seeing his health bar. The entire game builds up to you fighting Lothric as the final boss, and it sets him up perfectly to be a great final boss. A lord chosen to link the flame but refused and lets the flame burn out is such a perfect concept, but then the Soul of Cinder is at the kiln, the amalgamation of all the souls who have linked the first flame. The Soul of the Lord's item states that the Soul of Cinder acts as the flame's guardian, and that's the part that doesn't make sense for multiple reasons. 1. The Soul of Cinder to exist and protect the first flame in the event that it's going out, the flame must be sentient to recognize its current state and its own mortality. 2. If the flame is sentient and knows that it soon will fade, then why would you create a guardian who could potentially kill the next person to link the flame? I understand the point of wanting a guardian because you don't know the purpose of someone coming to the kiln. You don't know if they're going to try and put an end to the first flame or not. But in such a vulnerable state, needing to resurrect the past lords just so there would be enough souls to link the flame once more, you wouldn't take the risk of killing the next person to link the flame. If they were to die to the Soul of Cinder, then the flame fades anyway. The Soul of Cinder is a poorly written and executed boss. It makes no sense for him to be there at all. Say what you want about the fight itself, I think it's even cool despite its second phase being clearly Gwyn nostalgia bait. Now, take this next bit with a bit of salt, but on the Soul of Cinder wiki page, it has a bit of trivia saying that Sullivan would have been the final boss and not the Soul of Cinder. Soul of Cinder replaced him late in development, which would explain the poor introduction and execution. I think standalone, Soul of Cinder is a fine fight and serves its purpose as a final boss. The part that annoys me is how much better Lothric would have been as a final boss, and how the previous 2 games do it way better. For the Souls games, it shows that the final fight doesn't have to be some super hard and flashy fight. It can just be a boss that's been built up super well and that there's a lore purpose. Even if the fight isn't super good like Nashandra, it can still be a respectable end to the games. If the boss is both a super well built up fight and a fun challenging fight as well, then that makes the boss even better. But I prefer to have my final fight be fleshed out character that has a reason to be where they are, than to have my final boss be some just hard fight for the sake of being a final boss. I'd rather them have a purpose to be there. Before I end the video and get to the outro, I just want to talk about one last part that I think every good Souls boss has, and it's a really important aspect to me, and I just think it needs its own section. The walk. In each game before the final fight, there exists the walk to the boss. In Dark Souls 1, it's the walk through the kiln, facing the last followers of Gwyn and an Ashley Wasteland. In Dark Souls 2, we delve deep into Drangleic after achieving the Giant's Kinship and the King's Ring. In Dark Souls 3, after getting through the archives, you meet Lothric's last line of defense, The rough barricades and scattered troops show just how much of a final act of desperation it all is. And then for the Solf Cinder, it's just a short sprint to the kiln. Nothing of real importance. No defense. And while that certainly can play a hand in the first flame fading, I think it being such a short empty walk is worse and a longer walk, because then at least you have time to take it all in. Like always, I just want to come in here at the very end and just, actually talk unscripted. I'm okay with this video. I don't think I got the best footage for it. And I was kind of hesitant on doing it because I had this constant thought, like, what if I'm wrong? What if, people are going to be upset at this? Which, I think, opinions are a thing, and obviously they should be, but I think a lot of people in the Souls community don't tend to listen to opinions, so we'll see how this video is received. I know a lot of people will like it, and I feel like a lot of people won't like it, but hey, I don't do, I do videos for what I want to make, and I wanted to make this for a long time now, so I thought, spend 2 weeks, kind of take a break from challenge runs to recover my sanity after the spear-only one, to do this one. If you saw my community post, or if you didn't, I have 3 other runs I'm working on. One is already done. It's already recorded, and I think I'll write the script tomorrow, which will be Sunday. So when the video comes out, I'll probably work on the script for that, and then have it edited and hopefully out by the next Sunday, so I can get back to weekly stuff. If not, then I don't know. It's not a very long video. It's only it's not even 4 hours of footage. It's a very short challenge run. Quotes. It's not really even a challenge run. I think it's just kind of a fun video. But the 2 runs I am recording are challenge runs. One of them is going to suck to finish. I've barely touched it, and it will be very painful. So I hope you enjoy it, because I won't. The other one I am currently going through as well. I am enjoying that one, even though it is really hard. I don't want to spoil it yet, but it is not a Souls run. It is for a different game. And there are going to be other videos possibly made by the same people who made that game. So I don't know. We'll just see how it goes. There are actually a few videos too I have put on, the back burner, that either they're just going to take a while to record, or they're just, I wasn't having fun with the challenge run, or whatnot. Just all that kind of stuff. But I don't want to keep everyone here for too long, so thank you for watching, and I will be hopefully back to doing challenge runs soon if you don't care for this video. But if you didn't care for this video, you probably didn't watch this to the end anyway, so who knows. But thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one.